Hello students, it's Dr. Z here again, and we're going to continue our study of bacteria or germs. Let's do a quick review. Last time I was with you, we talked a little bit about bacteria, and as you can see here, bacteria are really small, okay? And remember, we talked about how if I put 1,000 bacteria, line them up one after the other, that they would be still so small that we could hardly see them. Scientists need special microscopes, instruments that help you see very small things. We also said that there were good bacteria and there were bad bacteria. And luckily, there are a lot more good ones than there are bad ones. And we'll talk a little bit more about those bad ones. Bacteria are everywhere, on and in our bodies, on animals, on clothes, in our house, in our food and what we drink, in all the water all over the world. And there are more bacteria than there are people, animals, and plants all put together. Can you imagine that? Wow. And we also looked at some pictures. These are pictures taken through a microscope about how small bacteria and how many different shapes they take. They're really very interesting looking. Okay? Now, we also talked about how bacteria can grow. Bacteria are alive, and they do have kind of a life cycle, but it's a very different life cycle than it would be of the butterfly we studied or the deer that you are studying. And I think you will recall that we talked about bacteria growth. Do you remember that? And this was really very interesting. If we start out with one little bacteria there with the happy face, okay, and we call him a cell, a bacteria cell, the bacteria likes to eat. There's certain food that he likes to eat, and when the time is right, he'll divide into two bacteria. So he disappears, he or she, there is no he or she, it's just an it, becomes two bacteria. And then in a few, maybe 12 more minutes, each one of these will divide, and instead of two, now we'll have 4. And then in about 12 more minutes, those 4, each of them will divide, and now we'll have 8. And that happens again, we'll have 16, and that all happens again. We'll have 32 bacteria, again 64, 128, 256, and that just continues and continues, so that starting with that one little lonely bacteria there, by let's say during the time that you're in school, okay, the time that you spend now on the computers in school, that one bacteria could grow into, are you ready for this? 1,000,000 bacteria, 1,000,000 of them. So, very interesting life cycle, huh? Now, the last time I was with you, I showed you how we were going to grow bacteria. And remember, I told you that we had these Petri dishes. They were in 2 parts, and at the bottom of the bottom part of the Petri dish, there was something that the bacteria like to eat. It was called agar, and it comes from seaweed. Okay, so let's look at the results now of our experiment in growing bacteria. The first thing I'd like to show you is one of the places in your house where unfortunately there are usually a lot of bacteria are in your garbage disposal. Do you know what that is? In your kitchen, or you have your big sink and all the water goes down the drain. Well, right under that drain is a little machine that's called a garbage disposal, and it has a steel blade in it, and when you turn on the garbage disposal, that blade goes around really, really fast, and food that is left over from your meal or from preparing meals goes down the drain into that garbage disposal, and the blade cuts it up into little pieces so that it can go out into the drain. Unfortunately, it's hard to get down there and clean, you know. So there is a lot of bacteria that seems to form in there. And I actually went into ours, put a glove on my hand, and I took that cotton swab and I kind of swabbed around in the garbage disposal. And this is what I found. You see all those little swirls in there? That's where I took the cotton swab and I brushed it on the bottom, and all those little swirls, those are bacteria, and there are a lot of them in there. So pretty interesting, huh? They really grew beautifully. Now here's another one that I talked about. This is a computer keyboard. You know, you all have one of these. And remember, I took my cotton swab and I took some water and I brushed it along the keyboard to pick up any bacteria that may be on the keyboard. And let's see what I picked up. Wow. You see all those little what scientists call colonies, those little spots of bacterial colonies that are growing in there. You see them? Wow. That showed us that there is a lot of bacteria on the keyboard, right? Okay, that tells us something very important. Now, remember, I took the keyboard and I took a disinfectant wipe and I wiped the keyboard real good, and then I took the cotton swab and I cleaned the keyboard again with that cotton swab, and I put that in another one of these Petri dishes, and this time you can see that there's a little less. Okay, there is still some stuff in there, but it's I think it's cleaner. It certainly is cleaner than the one where I didn't clean it. Okay, but I must say I could have done a better job of cleaning, you know. But this does show you that cleaning the keyboard does get rid of some of that bacteria. And that is a really good lesson for us, guys, especially since you're using your computer so much and using those keyboards all the time. Every day you should have your parents get you some of these swabs if you're not doing this, and every day before you use it in the morning or at night, you should clean off that keyboard real good and get rid of all those bacteria on there. Because here's the problem. You know, you're typing and doing things, and a lot of times we put our fingers to our face, right? Near our nose or near our mouth. And that's not good, because those bacteria can get in your nose and in your mouth. And even though I said there are a lot more good bacteria than there are bad, every once in a while you're going to pick up one of those bad ones. You get it in your nose or in your mouth, that can cause some illness. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, let's look at another comparison. I thought this was really interesting. where I live here, we have a lot of ponds on the ground, water with fish in it. And so I went down to one of those ponds and I just took some of the water from the pond and I put my cotton swab in it, and I took a petri dish and I applied it to the bottom of the petri dish. And this is the one with pond water. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff growing there, right? Wow. So this is why you should never drink water just out of a pond or out of a lake, because there's a lot of bacteria in there, okay? You see that? Now, I did the same thing with tap water, okay? So the tap water is what we drink from our sink, and I took some of that and I put it on a petri dish, and this is what it looks like. Now, I'm still seeing some bacteria growing, but certainly it's better than the water out of the pond. So the lesson we learn here is, of course, that you never drink water from a pond or a lake. The water out of our taps in our homes has been treated, and a lot of the bad bacteria has been taken out, okay? So that's the lesson to learn from there. Okay, one more interesting one. I decided to see if there was any bacteria in my mouth. So I took one of the cotton swabs, and before I brushed my teeth, I checked it, and then after I brushed my teeth, I checked it. And as you might imagine, there's a bit of a difference. You can see this one here. There's a lot of things growing in there. You can see they're kind of yellow, and the color might be an indication that those are not the best of bacteria. But if you check that with the one after I brushed, you can see there's quite a big difference, right? Let me do it this way. It'd be easier to see it this way, yes. So this is the one before brushing, and this is the one after brushing, okay? So there is a big difference. So what this all tells you guys, of course, is that you've got to be careful. You need to brush your teeth a lot, because inside of your mouth is a great place for bacteria to grow. It's just the way it is. Okay, last thing I wanted to share with you, something very interesting. Trying to do this, and for scientists to grow bacteria and learn about them, one has to be very careful about the actual petri dishes or the whatever kind of environment they're growing the bacteria in. I wanted to show you this. This was a brand new petri dish that I received in the mail when I ordered these petri dishes. And I had this one just sitting out in the air. And I have a feeling when I received it from, I'm not sure who made it or where it came from, but there must have been some bacteria already in there, because look at the amount of growth. I didn't even put anything on this plate. This has developed on its own, and you know, it has a rather strong smell too. So that just shows you that bacteria are just everywhere, and it's hard to find a place that's nice and clean. In fact, when scientists are working on things like bacteria, You may have seen pictures where they work in rooms that are very, very clean, and the scientists are wearing special kind of almost like space helmets. Everybody's wearing gloves. It's to try to keep the area nice and clean so that there are no bacteria in the air and in the environment, so that the scientists can then study the bacteria in isolation. So these were some interesting experiments. I hope you enjoyed them. It gives you some idea how careful we have to be about bacteria. And let's talk a little bit about actually how do we fight bacteria, okay? This is fighting the bad bacteria, okay? And this is the microscope that scientists use to look at bacteria and study them. And these are the books. It takes a lot of research and a lot of reading. And then there's chemistry involved. And there are things that we can do. This is a strong arm, if you can see that. There are things that we can do to help protect ourselves from the bad bacteria. And we've already mentioned them. You should be washing your hands all the time, washing keyboards, washing surfaces where you prepare food, keeping your body clean, washing your teeth a lot, and brushing your teeth a lot, and keeping your hands away from your nose and your mouth and your ear. But what happens when, unfortunately, a bad bacteria gets into our bodies? And sometimes it can make us sick. You can get what they call infections. You've heard that word. Sometimes there's an infection kind of in your head. There can be an infection in your stomach. And luckily, over the years, scientists have found medicines that help. They're called antibacterials. And the doctor can give you one of these either as a pill or as a liquid. And it can help fight these bacteria. So this is I think a good lesson about the world around us that you can't even see, that is so important, because it can affect our lives, right? It can affect whether we're feeling good or not feeling good, or whether our stomachs are digesting the food properly or not. Okay, one last thing before I go this time. We've been talking about bacteria, and I would like to talk to you about something else that is equally important, and those are called viruses. Okay, now remember when I said bacteria are really, really, really small? Well, viruses are really, 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 really small. For example, if I blew up a bacteria, you know how small a bacteria is, but let's say that this was a good bacteria and I blew them up to this size. Do you know what the size of the virus would be? There, you see that spot right there? That would be the virus. And this would be the bacteria. That's how small these things called viruses are. And we can't even see them with normal microscopes. We have to use something that was discovered a number of years ago called an electron microscope. This huge machine. And we need that special machine to try to see these viruses. And the thing about viruses is there is really no medicine to cure a sickness from a virus. And there are a lot of sicknesses that come from viruses. And the most interesting one is the coronavirus. Have you heard that word, the coronavirus? That's why you're at home and I'm at home and we're talking like this rather than being at school. Because that little coronavirus, over the course of a few months, spread all around the world. And normally, how do doctors and scientists fight viruses? Well, they have developed things called vaccinations. Have you heard of that, vaccinations? It's usually a shot. Well, those protect you from a lot of the bad viruses that are around. Unfortunately, this new one called the coronavirus, we have not developed a vaccine yet. So it's easy to get, just like we talked about bacteria, where you're handling things and you get it in your nose, in your mouth, or when you cough or sneeze and someone else is near you. That's the way you pick up viruses and bacteria both. And so that's why we're keeping away from each other and wearing masks. And hopefully, I'm confident that very soon we will have a vaccine for this coronavirus and we'll all be able to get back to school, okay? And it'll be so much fun for me to meet you guys and talk in person. Well, I know this is a lot for you to take in. I'm sure you're going to talk more about this over the course of your school year with your teachers, but this is a very important aspect of our life in our earth and nature. These little invisible things, bacteria and virus, that are so small, yet they have a big impact on our lives, right? Okay, guys, keep studying, and I hope to be with you again shortly with another interesting topic in science. Study well and take good care of yourselves.